I'm Mark Horton. I'm in Toronto talking to multiple World Bridge champion Eric Rodwell about his new book, The Rodwell Files. Eric, The Rodwell Files has a lot of interesting new ideas on card play. When did you start thinking about all these things and writing them down?
Well, I've always thought about them whenever I played. I started playing in 1969, but I mean the idea of trying to organize them in this manner occurred to me in the 80s, because I noticed everybody knows what a hold-up play and a finesse is, and that sort of thing. And there's other more advanced plays like scissors, coups, and a rule of restricted choice. But a great number of other types of plays don't have names, even though they've appeared in the literature. If you have a name attached to it, I think it makes it a lot easier to see it at the table when it comes up.
Okay. Did you always plan to write a book about these things?
No, I didn't at all, actually. I showed the notes to Fred Gittleman in the late 80s, and I guess it circulated among a small group of people, and Ray had asked me maybe as much as 15 years ago if I wanted to put it into a book, and it was just like a list of maybe 20 pages or something. And I just said, well, this would be an enormous amount of work. I don't think so. And then he brought you on board last year, and he said, you could come up with a lot of hands for the book. I said, now, that sounds like an excellent idea, and I must say you've done a mighty fine job of doing it, Mark.
Well, thanks for that. So you've made a point of giving names to the plays and tactics you describe in the book. Now, why do you think that's important?
Well, I guess on a personal thing, I'm always thinking of names for everything. I just sort of, in college they said if you can attach a name to something, especially if it's a bit silly, you know, it makes it easier to remember. Now, a lot of the names of things just deal with the play itself, like this one called the knockout or entry fly, which deals with knocking out an entry. I mean, like either knocking out their card or holding as an entry when you play a card from dummy that you wouldn't ordinarily play. And other ones, I've named a few after players, or just given them some names that just came into my mind at the moment. So as I point out in the book, you might want to name them something different, but that's just what I do, perhaps for my own entertainment as much as anything else.
Okay. Who do you think this book is for? Can a club player get something out of it, or is it just for advanced players?
It's basically for anybody who has been playing bridge for a while. It's not for an absolute beginner. You need to be playing some bridge. But it's for anybody who would like to either appreciate the higher level bridge game or to understand as much of it as they can at their level. As you know, I added 3 fairly lengthy introductory chapters, not only to sort of allow the weaker players and less experienced players to gradually get into it, but also to lay down a lot of the terminology and to explain things, as Frank Sinatra would say, my way. Because I think that a lot of these concepts, like even with finessing, I came up with some different names for some of those things and some aspects of those, that even though they're more fundamental, I think they're worth looking at in this way. So even if you're a more advanced player, I think you can get a lot from something like that.
Okay. Do you think you can really learn card play from studying a book like this, or is it just a talent that you happen to be born with?
Well, some people are born with more card sense than others, but I really think it's more a science than an art. Now, the art part of it is a matter of sort of reading the psychology of your opponents, but I mean the rest of it is a matter of seeing the combinations of cards and visualizing the possibilities. And since they're almost limitless in some situations, there's a lot of discussion in the book about how to limit your focus. Like I talk about the analytical techniques, and I also name a lot of these plays, and then we also categorize like when you should make all these unusual and counterintuitive plays in various categories. And these things together, I think, help you narrow the focus a lot. So I think a great deal of it can be learned by anybody who can visualize cards, even, you know, with some practice perhaps.
Okay. Have you ever been in a situation at the table where you've absolutely no idea what to do once dummy comes down, for example?
Sure, and those situations bothered me enough that I wanted to come up with some analytical techniques, like I talk about what to do if your analysis gets bogged down and that sort of thing. And there are certain techniques that I advocate, like if you need to start by counting your winners and losers. And then that's something that gives you an idea of whether you're in a situation where you can afford to deduct extra tricks or not. For example, I call that, with an L being for loser, a plus L situation. Because if you're in that situation, a whole family of additional plays opens itself up. Whereas if you're not, then you know you have to batten down the hatches, so to speak.
Okay. Were there any books that had a significant influence on you when you were starting out as a bridge player?
Well, of course, the original books I read were like Ernest Rovier's book on bridge and the Gorin things. But I would say the first thing really for me was the precision bidding system. In 1969, Taiwan came second in the World Championships, playing just a very simple version of precision, and that was right about the time I started playing. So I started playing that. So the whole idea of having a scientific approach to the bidding appealed to me. So then I decided that something similar, at least for myself, for the play would make sense as well. Now, there have been many great books about bridge. Terence Rees wrote many of them, Master Play. Hugh Kelsey, you know, he has a lot of great themes in there, but he didn't name any of them. So I decided that the various themes that I saw, some in various books should have names. Some of them just from hands that I saw or hands that I played.
Eric, the book has a fantastic number of phrases associated with card play ideas. Do you think any of those are going to enter the glossary of bridge terms that become familiar to players all over the world?
Well, I was thinking I'm playing a hand and somebody lays down a jack and says gouging or something. So I hope so. You know, I mean, I imagine some people will maybe ridicule a few of them, but I mean, I'm hoping that they will, because like hold up play and finesse and all this stuff have stuck. I don't know why some of these couldn't, so I'm hopeful.
Okay. Look, if somebody reading your book could only take one idea from it, which one would you like that to be?
Well, you know, since I teach bridge one-on-one mostly, everybody's an individual, and what everybody needs most is actually a different thing. So I'd say take from it what you find to be the most useful thing, but I would say, generally speaking, we're talking about the analytical techniques. And then the names of plays, you know, help you on top of that. And there's many of those, but the one thing would be the analytical technique, I'd say.
Okay. So when you first started out on this project many years ago, you had maybe 40 pages. Now, how did you get to 400?
Well, of course, you're a big part of that. I counted the deals in there. There's something like 180 some that you came up with, and I came up with almost 120. Now, a lot of them, some of them were in the original text, and a lot of them just came from my play. I only had started recording my hands once we agreed to start the project, and over the course of a year, quite a few hands came up. Actually, it was less than a year. So. But I did feel like it's not so much about talking about whether I did well or not did well, but a question of illustrating the principles, and with as many as possible where I was at the table, but many of them involve other players too.
Yeah, okay. If you had to give a piece of advice to an aspiring young player who wanted to improve, what would you suggest to them? Read
my book as many times as necessary. Now, it's a long read. Like, it takes me, you know, quite some number of hours to read through it, so I can imagine it would take a lot longer. Like I said, it's a reference book, it's entertainment, it's many different things, so, you know, don't expect that you can digest it, you know, in an afternoon. But that's certainly the least expensive Rodwell advice anybody's going to get, so that's definitely what I would suggest.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Eric. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise, Mark.
Good. Well, we're done. We're done.
Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.